Okay, next thing on the list is a really useful one, but we will only see minimal of that really usefulness in this class. When we look at JavaScript, which is going to be very quickly, and I like to include some server-side scripting, since the free domain host, any free domain host site you go with, there's a very popular content management system called WordPress, and some less popular ones, but still out there. You might have heard of Wix and Squarespace. They follow the same conventions as WordPress. That's used a LAMP stack, so MySQL and PHP for the server-side scripting and database storage and stuff. So any time you go to a free domain hosting site like we used in this class, and went for one of the discussion boards and looked at the backup sites, those are going to accept PHP and probably have at least one MySQL database, because that's what they have to do in order for somebody to host a WordPress, Wix, or Squarespace site. And that's the big three, and the list is actually really cool. That's the one we see commercials about, but think about like shoe advertising. We see about 3 brands of shoes, but there are thousands and thousands and thousands of brands of shoes, of shoe manufacturers. So there's similar thing with software. So we'll look a little bit at JavaScript, and I like to show some PHP, because that way we can write files and save data and things like that. But first off, we need to see how to put those interfaces together so we can get data from the user. That's where forms are, and buttons for the user to click on. I'm sure a UI, the UI elements, and I think by 2023, UI is just common in English, right? Everybody knows what user interface means. So all of that. Talk about those. And again, that's how modern software is developed. We develop web applications. Desktop stuff has completely gone away, but the Java programming language discarded all of theirs. So there's not a desktop package that's part of the Java programming language. They just got rid of it. They had trouble for a long time. By the time they got it made, they'd already seen what happened to them previously in Python, where you get stuck with it. Python is stuck with a 30-year-old package where they lose backward compatibility. TK interface package, anybody that studied Python probably saw that. The one made in the late 1980s, and it looks like it was made in the late 1980s. It's stuck there, or Python is no longer going to be backward compatible. So things like Java, they just got rid of theirs. They don't want to get stuck with that again. They don't want to get stuck with old stuff. Their old one was at least 12 years newer than Python, when Python was stuck with. But styles change, improvements happen. So some of the big languages are just not even putting GUI packages in there anymore. We use the HTML5 standards and make a web application, and then we can containerize things. With the prevalence of the web, then all you need is a browser. You don't even have to have certain criteria for your software. The developer is in charge of it. Like when we install stuff on somebody's computer, we're trusting that they don't delete the database that our software depends on, or any other files, right? And this is going to make it crash, or that they already have all the software they need to run it. But if it's a web application, we're in charge of that over on the server side, and they only get the end result of it. So there are a lot of advantages to it. And then once containers were invented, we can just take that web application and basically use the part of the browser, called the browser engine. We don't need the full browser where they can navigate to different sites. We just need something that will display HTML and then throw a form there and then do the processing like a local application that way. We still see some desktop applications, but it is definitely, we are well into the transition phase. Everything's made with web applications anymore. And then the cloud, there's It just really took off with the cloud. A lot of things are moving towards the cloud. So these are what we will use to build our graphical user interfaces in modern software development. Basically, our element is called a form. /form. And then we have inputs and buttons. We'll see that in example, inputs and buttons. We do this and. We'll see that, some ways to organize them nicely. Then all the layout stuff we saw in CSS, because you all have probably, in our modern world, you all have probably encountered those really nice forms and some really bad forms. Right? There's, I'm sure everybody's seen some really lousy layout of forms at times. But we saw layouts, so it's just the basic layout stuff. We'll see the inputs in a moment. In the opening tag for the form, this is what we want to do today. There's going to be two attributes we need: action and method. So action, this is how we process the form. For example, if you have a Python script on your server that you're going to use to run that. Let's see, EG, do stuff. .py is somewhere on a server. So you're just going to run that script. That's the action that you do whenever the form is submitted. That's on the server. We'll probably modify it a little bit, like we would go roundabout ways to get rid of the .py extension so that somebody with malicious intent wouldn't even know that it's a Python script that processes it, and then that adds extra steps they have to go through if they want to break through the security firewalls on it, things like that. We would make it look like a normal URL, but it refers to a Python script or a JavaScript. Usually port numbers are involved, and we hide the port numbers. We don't want people to know they're connected for Python script. No, they're connected up for anything. We know that when we develop our software, but they don't need to know that. So we won't get into a whole lot of this here. When we look at PHP, we will see that. And method, sorry, not plural. Method is how we send it. Servers do what's called the CRUD model, C-R-U-D. That's what servers are capable of. Create, read, update, and delete. CRUD makes a good way to remember that. But analogy doesn't even seem the right term. But the analogy I like is a server and client in a restaurant, because it is the exact same thing. If you go to Applebee's, or I said Applebee's last time, if you go to Tumbleweed and order a steak and margarita, you tell your server you want a steak and margarita. The server does not make either one of those things, right? The server is the one that knows to ask the bartender for the margarita and the kitchen steak, and then when they're ready, it brings them back to you. Computer science, computer architecture between servers and clients is the same thing. Where on the client machine, ask a server, and the server probably doesn't do what the client asks for. The server knows what machine will do that thing, and then sends back the results afterwards. So the middleman, is really what it is. So, but the restaurant analogy is spot on for a client and server, and a restaurant is the exact same behavior as a client and server and computer network. There's a bunch of different ones. The two that we're gonna use almost always, 99.99% of the time, get and post. They're almost identical. If we send it with the get method, we will see it in the URL. So it appends on to the URL when we submit our form, and it's in the address, and we can see it. And post behaves in the exact same way, only we can't see it in the URL. So in general, you're going to use get while you're debugging it, because it's a whole lot easier to debug a program when you can see the data that's being transferred. And then once all the bugs are worked out, then you switch to post, so that nobody can see the data as it's being transferred. There are some other ones you'll see later. For starting off here, it's either going to be get or post, and probably just use get every time to start with, because you can see the data. Remember, post, you won't see the data. There's a bunch of them. Request, but request is kind of the fallback. You do need request to send images. We won't get to that in this class. Okay, starting to go down the rabbit hole there. The rest of them we won't get to. Won't be things we see in this class. We just need to know the basic idea of what one of those words, one of the things a server responds to. Get, post, put, delete. I almost never do delete. Like a client can't, whenever I set stuff up, the client can't delete anything. The client can like send an email to the database administrator. Or the client can have the server send an email to the database administrator to delete something. But doesn't have direct access to delete it themselves. You don't have to think very hard to realize where that could be dangerous, cause major problems. But let's, there's a bunch of elements we have to work with. So let's just look at some of these elements. Anybody have any questions about that? That's the main things we need. Action is how it's processed. So I think your homework assignment on forms, they tell you to use this site that the textbook author set up. And what are we doing? Hey, we order sweatshirts in the camping one. The coffee shop has coffee mugs and t-shirts. I think we can just order sweatshirts when you get to that homework assignment, and then they'll give you an address where it sends in, and then it just pops up a thing. It doesn't really actually store it. It just pops up a page that says, "Oh, that'll be free sweatshirts," and goes to the total. But that's what goes in the action, and then method is either going to be get or post. So I'll create a new one here. Delete folder. I'll make a new folder called forms. And index.html. Is that big enough on the screen? Can y'all see that? Okay. I was zooming out a bunch, so. So we have our form. And all of our elements, and we'll come back and look at those attributes later. We usually always want to do those two. When we get near the end, we'll throw something in there. We also want to see our basic ones, which are inputs. Input. Well, let me just put an input thing there and show you what that gives us. I'll put an input tag. Oh, that's not the right one. This one. And an input tag gives us a place to type text. We can't identify it yet. We need a little bit more. So text is the default, but we can add that in explicitly because all of almost everything else we're gonna put here is also an input. So I know personally, I like to go ahead and put type equals text just to keep that straight. Then there's a couple other things that we want. In particular, we want the name attribute. Name equals words. And the reason we want that is, well, actually, I'll show you. And now it's going to look the same. I put another input down here. Type equals submit in all lowercase letters. And value, I'll do submit with an uppercase S. So the type of input is a submit button, and the value is the words that show up. Usually it's submit for both of them. The type is all lowercase. I also have a reset one like that. Input type equals reset, value equals clear. That makes it a little bit clear, a little bit easier to see which one's which. Reason I decided to go ahead and jump ahead, and we will look at those attributes, is to notice there's no line break in the input tag. So we put lots of them in the same line, but you're gonna need something that has a line break in it. So paragraphs or list items. List items have line breaks, and you can just turn the little dots off and like an unordered list. And then it just stacks nicely. The way our textbook does so many things. I'm going to use paragraph tag. That's what I usually do. So like paragraph tag, in the paragraph. Oops. Paragraph tag, and then in the paragraph there. And then I'll do some indenting to make it clear what's in, what's where. I'll put my name in there. You see what happened up there in the browser? Let me go back. So here's our page. Oh, whoops. My local machine. Oh, the local machine won't open index automatically. So here's our page. I'll stick some sort of word in there. Website. I'm going to hit, well, the clear button's obvious. Doesn't seem to change anything. Go and type website and hit submit. Notice what happened in the URL. I can't zoom in on the address bar, so it's going to be small on the screen. But you may have seen things like that before, right? A question mark, I always think of that as like a hook. We're going to hook some stuff onto it. And what we hook on is the words, which, remember, words was the name attribute. So the name attribute becomes the variable that we assign a value to. I guess I could put another one here. The input type equals number. Name equals count. Counter, that's. I'm going to add some more stuff to that, but words and numbers. So you know, like website, and notice here, we say type as number, we get the little up and down arrows. And if I come over here and match the keyboard, it's hard to tell, but I can't type any of the letters. Numbers will type in, but only numbers will type in. The decimal will type in. A comma will not type in if you're in America. If you're in Europe, the decimal, the dot would not type in, and you'd only be able to type the comma in. They use those different than we do. Dot goes between like the thousands and hundreds place, and the comma goes elsewhere. But then we have some other values that we can use with it. attributes that we might want to turn on. Oh, yeah, I was gonna put a number there. And if I type 1, 2, 3 and hit submit, notice there's an ampersand between that. So this is the get method. The get method puts that stuff in the URL. So if it's not data you're worried about people seeing, you just use the get method or the default version, and then that's what goes to the server. So the name attribute from the tag equals some value, and then ampersand another name attribute equals another value, and it just keeps adding up that way. What's going to put? We can put a value. Value is we'll start at 3, and then step of 4. When I reload it, I can still type any number. I can type 5 without problem. But it starts at 3, and whenever I hit the up arrow, it goes up by 4. Same thing with floating point numbers. So if it's like a money value, set it so you can only adjust by two digits at a time. Step by 0.01. I'm gonna mess around with that. I was just going to quickly show the attribute is there. Let's see. I'm going to do another one. I'm going to duplicate that and set this to like 3.14, and our step size here is 0.0004. So in the third one, we have the floating point number, and so just throw the dot in there. If you want to use floating point numbers instead of whole numbers. And at this point, we can already see it's going to be sort of disorganized before long. So one of our main types of organization is a field set. So I wrap all those in field set. And get all this stuff and try to word wrap off. Word wrap. So that gives us a nice little box around the form, or different sections of the form. Oh, we should probably put some labels on here, huh? Words and text. And this one is whole numbers. Fractional numbers. So notice the words just kind of go in the way we've been typing HTML, paragraphs in HTML. Nothing fancy there, just throw the words inside of some element and outside of another element, and they'll end up in the right spot. Now one I forgot, or that I always get confused, it was captioned earlier. Usually I'm not doing both at the same time, so I have to check every time. So a field set gets a legend. This is where I would have thought a caption. I think of a table like, well, I guess I associate it with the legend on a map or a legend on a chart, where it gives us more information. But a legend of basic text and number input. And notice it puts the label right in that border that surrounds it. So it's not just a border, it's special type of encapsulation, keeps things organized. Not really another one that goes with this, but we saw color, right? The color is going to be input, type equals color. Make sure you always put a name on there. Oh. Be careful not to duplicate the name, because that's how we send it to the server. So you want unique. semi-unique names. Radio buttons do have to have the same name. That's why we can only select one at a time. The circle buttons, that when we click one, the other one unclicks. We organize those by giving all the radio buttons the same name. And then it treats them all as one thing, so we can only click one at a time. Name is, I don't know, Tint. Tinting, that sounds like a good name for it. I'm going to finish out that paragraph. We saw this earlier of that. I use that most often, like the little cards with different colors on. We could pick up at Home Depot and stick it on paragraphs around the page site, so you can compare colors right there inside, and then just delete them at the end. And if you wanted like a default color, so RGB, HSL, hex, be over here. You can grab some hex color and copy and paste that over here for the value of it. But apparently I didn't have the right thing on there. So I'm gonna make up some number. I thought I hit copy, but apparently not. 3B A291. That's our random hex color. And then that gives us a different starting point. That's usually what I do for testing them. The colors I think are going to go there, I'll put there and maybe make little adjustments or have them sit like people do with the color swatches from Home Depot. You grab the cards and then you tape them to the wall and stare at it for a couple of days and make sure you're going to be happy with it. I'll do that in the middle of paragraphs. What else we got? Fancier text. I'll do it in another field set. And in a legend that says fancier text. Again, almost all of these are going to be inputs, which do not have any line feeds on their own, so you don't need to handle line feeds. The break paragraphs, list items, or just using a BR tag, the line feed tag. Or I always think of it as a break tag. I'll do that one this time. Might as well see some different ones. Input type equals password. Yeah, that'll work. Name equals password. Just to be in the habit of always putting that in there. Oops, in the field set. Then a break tag. Another input type equals email. Name equals email. So obviously, password, email, username, those sort of things. That's probably what we would put there, right? I want to put it in the right order there. Put email up top. Email / username. Follow that up with password. The thing about the email is if I just type my name there, get an automatic message. That's clearly not an email. There's no @ symbol. At fake.fake. It's not an intelligent check. So it counted fake.fake as at fake.fake at least looks like an email address. The password is probably what you would expect. We type, we don't see the letters pop up there. Depending on the browser, you might get the little eyeballs. You can see it over to the side. Type my name in there. And submit though, notice we can see the password there. Type my name, but when it, using the get method, it definitely can see what was typed into that password field. So definitely be careful with things like that. Remember security, but that's for a point later. We're just looking at the basic ones. Sort of a phone.
Security first.
Yes, security is important. I'll go ahead and put it as a phone because it's really a text box, but it's just a certain property for it. Type equals text. And in all of our text boxes, we have a placeholder property. That's the grayed out text that would show up. This just seemed like a good place for that. There's some buttons right on there. Oops. Sometimes the predictive text is more useful than others. Actually, on most of our inputs, we have the placeholder, and you get that grayed out text, so that as soon as you go click in that box and start typing, that the hint text is what a lot of people call it. It's also popular to see those, quite popular to see those instead of labels, because then it's very obvious what label goes with what box. Sometimes the layouts might, depending on the form, might not be the easiest thing to tell which label goes with which particular box. So maybe that our textbook talks about a label tag that ties them together, but it's I don't ever use it consistently. It's in the textbook if you want to use it. See that it doesn't position them together. It doesn't do it. It doesn't style them together. Yeah, I don't ever use it, but the textbook mentions it. We would wrap a special label tag. I always just put text around those. Have anything else for special text? Oh, date. That's like text. Date, input, type equals date, name equals date. That'll give you a little calendar where you can choose whatever date you want, or type one in. Actually, we should do that. There was a question about that earlier in the semester, so we looked at that. I couldn't remember the format for the value to put in there. So if you want to start with a value, let me duplicate that and then call this one thing 2. Set date. And then value equals, instead of the user clicking on a value, we can enter one. Was it year first? Who was in here when that question came up? I think it was year. So notice it shows month / day / year. But I think we go year. So like 2023 -2 -20, which might be backwards. 20 -2. Let's see if that works. HTML input date. Don't know the general process, right? Take a couple guesses. You'll learn better if you take guesses, but don't waste a lot of time guessing. I usually do like 3. If I can't get it in 3 guesses, I'll go look it up. But usually once we start to get the format, we can kind of get it. So value should be 2018 7.2. Oh, a minute max. Those can be useful. You want to narrow it down. It must be year, month, day. Which I thought that's what I did. Year, month, day. Save that. Boundary equals. Oh. You can see here, 07, so I have to have 2 digits. As you can tell, I almost never put a default date in there. That question came up earlier this semester though, so might as well put it in there. But when we do that, it doesn't go in the same order that it shows on the thing. And what you get when you click on it depends on the browser. So some browsers still have the spinning wheel things. Some of the date box will look different. Open it in different browsers to see what that looks like. And that's kind of all of the inputs. They will look different in different browsers. They should behave similar, and styling these can be very problematic at times. I'll put this after the field set. Under the list item without an ordered list, but the list items include a line breakout. Input type equals range. Name slider. There we see the different types of line breaks. That's how you get the little slider thing. As you dot value would just give us the starting point. By default, it starts in the middle. And you move it up and down and really would grab the value from a script. So there's not really a whole lot we can do, but those can be problematic to style. As the border is a rectangle that encloses that. There's the track border, the thumb icon, and there's lots and lots and lots of different pieces to that, which make them kind of a headache to style at times. Well, the first time. Then you just copy and paste it from a file you did earlier once you get the style you like. But there's a lot of pieces to that one. And notice list item did have the dot. So probably want to set the style so there's no dot here. Which we could do right here. Style equals list style I think type. No. Take rid of the dot? Yeah. So list style type is the little dot that goes on it. Right? The filled in dot is called a disk. A circle is the hollow one. Let's have drop-down menus. Those are useful. Field set. Section options. So first type of options we might have would be a select one. And this one is not an input. So the select element, and then inside of the select element, we put an option. So option, and make sure you put a value on each option. Name equals dropdown. So the select element gets the name that gets sent to the server, and then we're going to choose one of the options. So the name goes on select, and the values go down here. First, and the option value equals 2. And this be second. Option value equals 3. We'll call it third. SELECT. Sorry, I spelled select wrong. It is the proper way to spell the word select, as in selection. There we go. And that gives us the drop down where we choose one. What I often do is add an extra one at the beginning. Because notice, if I reload the page, it shows the first option. So I like to add an extra one at the beginning that doesn't have that, maybe has a placeholder. Will placeholder work here? Pick one. No, placeholder's not going to work for us. You can put the value to like pick one or something, or just leave it blank. Oh, there's a way. There's a way to do it with CSS. I remember what I do now. I use CSS and the content. We can type in the HTML file from CSS. We won't see that for like week 8 when we get to the odds and ends at the end. But there are ways that we can actually type on the HTML, change the HTML file from CSS. But that gives a blank starting point. I find that useful. And styling this is a lot like styling the thing here. It's not as simple as just changing the color. You'll see that. For now, so for this class, your forms don't have to be perfectly well styled because that can be a massive, massive headache. Like this select element. There's a border, there's this area, the drop down thing, what it highlights with, the little arrow here. There's even more names that we have to go in there and access to change it. So they get styling those can be a little strange at times. UL in that and checkbox. List items. Oops. Input type equals checkbox. No surprises there. Name equals first. We put some words beside it here. So the words beside it there kind of pop up out front. I can also do that as a value on that as well. Or actually, I can't. See what happens when I do the value. The value is true or false. Actually, let me go. First option there. So if I hit submit, that's way at the end of the URL. Oh, there's no name on it. So it didn't show up in the URL. Oh, there is a name. Am I just overlooking it? Might have been getting a little error there. Oh, I guess it's just running out of room. I'll try pasting that somewhere. Okay, we'll put something there. Will that work? I'm not sure where that one's getting stuck. I'll come back and look at it, figure that out later, and we'll, before we get around to doing things with our form, today we're just looking at the elements, maybe applying some styles. I'll duplicate that a few times, whoops. Duplicate. Second, third, fourth, fifth. Not feeling very creative. Notice if we start at the left, working down the column. I mentioned that before, it's more productive. Now our next column is all misaligned. So it's a lot better to start at the right and then work back to the left. That way everything still lines up nice. Second. And checkboxes, we check multiple ones at the same time, right? So each one is going to get its own name and corresponding value. Maybe that's what I was messing up. Put something there, check a couple of those. Oops, that's not the button I meant to push. Check a couple of those and hit the submit button. Did they show up that time? There we go. Notice the second is there at the end. Shows second is on and fourth is on, but it didn't show first, third, or fifth. So when it's checked, it's on, and if it's unchecked, it's null. It just doesn't send anything to the server. Go to the page that way. Along with checkbox buttons, we usually have radio buttons. I'll go ahead and put those in the list too. Something different. Input type equals radio, which you can treat the radio buttons just like the checkboxes. But what changes is the radio buttons all get the same name, size, and then there's a Boolean check. So we also have the check button up here as well. So maybe if we wanted the fourth check by default, just add that Boolean attribute in. And then these, they're all radio buttons and they all get the same name, but only one of them can be checked at a time. And on that, you usually want to have a default check value. If you don't, they have to check the first time, and then when they click another one, it'll be there. But it just seems customary that one of the radio buttons is already checked. And when they have this, it's the same name value that allows us to do this. So you can interchange those. If you wanted your square buttons to have that feature functionality, you could give them all the same name. But that's going to throw off your user. Right? Most people know if there's square boxes, we can click multiple ones, and if it's round, we can only get one. So you can change it, but it's going to confuse your user. So it's probably not a good idea to change it. The submit buttons, that gives us a good start on inputs. Maybe one more. We have the submit buttons, but I'm going to add another one in here. Actually, I'm going to add it after the form so it doesn't submit the form, because if I put it in the form, it would submit the form. Add a couple breaks in here. couple line breaks. And I'm doing another paragraph with a button tag. Oh, I forgot an important one. I did forget a very important one. A button tag. Usually for button, we use an on-click attribute, which will call JavaScript. But for now, I'm just going to show that there is a button element. And I put it outside of the form here. Button is outside of form because it would automatically submit when clicked. We already have a submit button. We don't need another button that would automatically submit the form. But it's down there, just a basic button. Styling buttons is very straightforward. So that one's quite easy. I did forget kind of an important text one you probably want. Buttons, radio buttons, checkboxes. I'll put that up at the top. So maybe before the form ends, I'll put in this text area attribute. Well, I'll add some line breaks before and after. And that gives us this little box here where we can type stuff in and resize it if we need more room to type stuff in. Here's some text, and we can highlight a word and right click and copy that word and paste that word and a whole bunch of stuff like that. So that's a really, really useful one. It's the text area element. Again, to send it to the server, you want to give it the name attribute. Text editor. Placeholder. Those type stuff here. We get that grayed out text that goes away when we start typing. Nothing fancy there. This one might throw people, sometimes throws people off. Notice I put those right next to each other. There are words. And if I type something in that element, they show up there. If I split that up, I put the element that way with the words in between, notice that line break showed up there as well. So it, unlike the normal, what the browser normally does, the text area does not ignore line breaks. It does not ignore white space. So you do have to be careful of that one. Usually just open and close, but those are very rare. Usually we start with a blank text area, right? If anything, there's going to be a placeholder that shows it in there, and you can just put the stuff there, or I'll go back to a placeholder. Placeholder equals type stuff here. That's kind of an important one. Oh, rows and columns. Row attribute is lines and columns is characters. So if we wanted to say 20 lines by 0. Oh, there's an S on it. Rows and calls by 45. So 20 lines tall and 45 characters wide. Be a nice little box to, and depending on the font, that's going to change. That's kind of like using that EM sizing. The rows and columns, depend very heavily on our font, but it gives us a place to type a bunch of input. So when we look at PHP, that's probably the one we'll use. We'll type some stuff in that, or maybe a couple boxes and send it to the CSV file. But we'll probably just type some stuff and send it to a text file on the other side. And we'll look at some JavaScript to practice using some of that. Styling them is either straightforward or kind of tricky. There's only 2 notes here I had about styling them, I think. Oh, 4 notes. I wrote 2 things, and then when I looked at the notes, I realized there's 2 more pseudo elements I wanted to talk about. The big thing, link relevance is style sheet. href is form.css. Copy that and save that here. I hope I saved that in the right place. Yeah. So the big thing is they're all input tags. Well, there's a couple that aren't input tags. They're almost all input tags. So that's not a good way to select it. We have to have name in there to get it to the server. If we're doing a client-side script, we're probably going to use ID. Most often for like a finished product, when it's not like tight time constraints in the classroom, you would have a name and an ID and they can match. So the client uses the ID for scripting and the server uses the name for scripting, so we can give them the same, it can match. But we have to have the name to get to the server. So a common way to select that would be by attribute. Anybody remember when we looked at that? That one's not in the textbook. So in square brackets, we can type in any of our attributes. So maybe type equals number. So any number type input. We could do some stuff with like background color is some RGBA color. 123, 42, 201, 65%. Notice nothing happened with the background color. About the color. Did I forget to save something?
You put it's that style sheet.
Yeah, let's start with the sheet on style sheet.
Oh. Thank you. There we go. So we get to change the color of them or change the background of them. Then 3 pseudo elements that will be important. I'm just going to copy that to get the point across real quick. 1, 2, 3. I'll do this one for password. When we hover over it, we might want to make it something yellow. Another one will be active. Well, and I'll make that green. So like 222. It's probably mostly green. And focus. Or focus. That one written in my note. I forgot it in the previous example, but I jotted it out on the paper to remember to tell you all about it. Focus. I can't remember if there's an ED on the end. Focus is the one we're working at. So I'll make that blue. 22201. That's definitely going to be a blue, and active is green. That's the big thing. So hover, just to remind you that that's there. That's something I want to see where we're getting ready to click at. Let's make that, put that on text. Text. So text. Those are good. Okay. You get it. Okay.
I turned it on mute.
Oh, you have to turn the audio off. Oh, okay. I found it best just to turn the audio off if we're in the same room. Because it requires multiple muting. It gets confusing. But yeah, hover makes it easier to see what's going to be there. There's a difference between active and focused. So if I come over here, reload that. When I click on it, notice it's blue. That was the focus. So when I start typing, and then hover on the password, that one's straightforward. Oh, that's not going to work. We zoom out. So it's blue. And when I click submit, it very briefly turned green. That was when it was active. So active does not last long. Focus is the one you probably want. Active is like when the computer is grabbing that data and sending it to the other computer. This is also an active thing, but that one's really hard to get to. If you start looking through forums, you will see hundreds and hundreds of forums that people that are professionals at website development just say people are used to that shade of blue. Don't bother styling it. You're just going to make yourself angry if you try. There's some little things we can do. We can override it, put other colors on there, but it's abnormally difficult and it's different for every single browser. So that highlighting comes from the operating system. So there's only so much we can do in the CSS of the browsers because the operating systems do different things. But it's still some stuff we can do. Focus is an important one though. You want to make sure people know what box they're typing in. And you use that primarily with the attribute selectors and the type attribute and the pseudo elements, things like that. There are a couple more long lists. That'll probably get you started with a bunch of stuff, right? If your place you can put text and numbers and buttons to click on, check boxes to alter some true and false values, different alternatives. It gets you started with forms. There's a long list. Color pickers. Yeah, we already talked about where I find those most useful. Throw them in a paragraph and delete them later once you get your colors picked, colors chosen. And then this is incredibly useful, making an online text editor. When you get to server-side scripting and know how to save that, you can just save that, write a bunch of PYs.
I got a question.
Yes.
Is it possible to make a website if I would look at the instruction, any instruction?
You mean like type the HTML code here? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's just a text editor. And then when you can't save locally though, because it would be a very, very, very big security risk if we could transmit a web page across the internet and automatically write files on the person's computer. So client-side scripting does not have save access. But on the server side, yes, you could just type up your HTML right here and make yourself an online HTML editor with a preview window right next to it. If it recognizes CSS and did it recognize HTML and CSS? Well, you could make it recognize JavaScript or JavaScript as well. Make your own online editor. Very, very easily. But just writing the code, and whenever we get to our quick pass at PHP, we'll see how to save the stuff there. And we just save it with the .html extension to make a web page out of it. Great question. Does anybody have any other questions? So
Okay, thank you.
this is the class about static stuff. It's only so much we're gonna do. I think your final project requires a form, so it'll be something like that. Like you'll use a bunch of these and just write them to a text file. We'll be fine for this class. We don't have to get very advanced with processing, but it'll be like simple form submissions, like sign up for a newsletter and enter your email address to receive coupons or something. So not a whole lot of static stuff for this class, but the boxes we type into are static. It's what we do with the stuff typed into them is the dynamic part that shows up in later classes. Give it a couple seconds. Okay, I assume 5 seconds of silence means there's no questions. I will get that up on the server in just a moment so you can see those examples, right? Go to my domain host, right click and view page source and paste. Or depending on your local settings, you might be able to go to that domain host I'm getting ready to upload it to and just hit Control S and save the whole website right to your computer. That can be dangerous, so your firewall might block that. That's not the best idea. Otherwise, I assume nobody had any questions. If you have any, let me know. I'm always happy to help. And I will send out a reminder on Monday after the database curriculum committee meeting, and I have a lot to say. I have a lot to say in the DBMS data analytics classes. So we won't have class on Monday. I will probably make a short video. It'll be like a 20-minute video. Get that sent out to you. Otherwise, you're all have a great weekend. Try to enjoy that nice weather out there. It is really, really nice. I'll see you next Wednesday.